This is the Pete Wong Podcast, sharing the things that I love with those that I love. I've always wanted to talk about the things that I care about in life. People have told me time after time, why don't you just share more of you? And with that, let's go.
Hey everyone, welcome to this week's The Pete Wong Podcast. I'm really excited for all of you to meet today's guest. I hope everyone's doing well. I know a lot of things have been changing, with the pandemic, things opening back up, but then you're hearing cases here and there. And I want to encourage all of us to still hold some space and hold some grace for ourselves and for each other, that even though things have changed, some things are still unknown, and hopefully everyone is just taking care of themselves and being safe. So my guest today is Albert Vang. How you doing, Albert?
Doing well. Glad to be here.
Awesome. Glad to have you here. Thanks for making the time to pop in here with me and with the listeners. Albert and I go back. I don't know.
I don't know. College for sure. College days. Maybe a couple years past.
Yeah.
The college days, but definitely in the later years of the college scene.
So Albert went to the U of M, or what we call it over here in Minnesota, U of M, University of Minnesota Twin Cities campus. Is that correct? Right?
Yes.
You were part of a group, a HMSA, and that's how I know. That's how I know of you. We have mutual friends, and Could you just tell everyone what the acronym HMSA is?
Yeah, so HMSA stood for the Hmong Minnesota Student Association.
You were like one of the main people, weren't you?
Yeah, so it started off, I think I got more involved with them in my sophomore year. My freshman year I was more involved with, I guess, the main kind of Asian group. And then I don't know what happened that I was like, yeah, I should just get involved with HMSA a little bit more. Maybe it was because, it was more of like the Hmong people kind of situation. But I got involved with that. I think I was on board my junior year, I believe, as the outreach chair. Pretty much from my sophomore year on, I was just kind of heavily involved and eventually got on board of one of those years.
So what I remember is that you guys always had like some cool events, like whether it was every weekend or every other weekend. It felt like every weekend.
Probably was.
So, but it was really cool because I just always felt a part of that group of friends. We have mutual friends, and I know that some of those friends, you were pretty close to them, or do you still remain pretty close to? Very
few of them. I think definitely at some point we all kind of went our adult ways, just kind of pursuing either family or just kind of, outside careers, that sort of thing. I think most of them are still in Minnesota for the most part. I don't want to say that we, grew away from each other, because I'm sure we would still recognize each other. We would still, greet each other and all that stuff. But yeah, we definitely kind of had, our separate ways after a while. But I still, keep in touch with a few of them, only because, again, we all have our own paths to kind of go on to now.
Flash forward to just this last May.
At the end of May, I think it was.
Yeah,
we were the last two.
Yeah, we were. Yeah. I heard we were the best.
Malia sent me a text saying, hey, the students really like you and Pete. I'm like, maybe we were the one that were actually more, I don't want to say like down to earth, but that were actually more open, I guess. Maybe the other ones might have been more business like, I don't know, but we were just kind of like, hey, let's just wing it, man. Let's just go with it and just see what happens.
So what Albert is talking about is a mutual friend of ours, Malia Lee, asked us if we could do some speaking, do some sharing of our story for, I believe it was Career Day, wasn't it?
I don't know what it was actually, but we'll call it Career Day. Throughout the month of May, they had different speakers,
And it just happened that Albert and I were speaking together on the same roster for that day. And it was funny because when I saw that picture of you that you used for the flyer, right?
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
I was like, okay, this guy looks familiar, but I'm not sure who it is. But then the name, I was like, Albert Vang. Like, I only know one Albert Vang. But it was really cool because when we started the like one of the first meetings that we had, you were like, oh yeah, I already know Pete.
Well, no, because I was gonna say, like, I was the opposite. Like, I should know this name, but I didn't really recognize it until I saw you, and I'm like, oh yeah, Pete. So then I was like, okay. So I was like the total opposite. You recognize the face, but maybe not the name. I was like, I think I recognize the name, but the picture really showed up. So yeah, so I didn't know it was like you, and then until you showed up, I'm like, oh yeah, of course, Pete. Of course, it's Pete.
Of course. Oh, thanks. Even though I wasn't, directly a part of HMSA, I always enjoyed seeing Albert. Whenever there was a gathering, whether it was a dance, or I think we give each other high fives on the dance floor, or whatever. But he just had this energy about him that was very positive and big smile, as all of you can see. And I really didn't know how he was, now. What was great was after hearing his sharing, I really thought it'd be a great idea to have him as a guest, and just another very like kind and inspirational soul. Albert, would you mind telling us about you?
Yeah, so pretty much, I was born in 1982. I was born in France, actually. So I think the story goes, after the Vietnam War, so my parents immigrated to France. My older sister, myself, and one other brother, all three of us were born in France. So I was there 7 of my years. The winter of '89, we moved to the States. We were in Denville, Illinois, for a couple months with my uncles on my dad's side. And I think around January, February or so of the following year, 1990, I think we reached out to my uncles from my mom's side who were in Fresno, California. So then we went there and lived in Fresno for about 3 years or so. And then probably for more job opportunities, possibly, my dad reached out to his nephew in Holman, Wisconsin. And so I think I was maybe, in that early tween stage, 12, 13 maybe. And then we moved to Holman, Wisconsin. And Holman is like a small town, like 15, 20 minutes north of La Crosse. So it was definitely that was an experience in itself, all over together. And then we were there for about 5 years. I thought that I was going to just be there because that might have seemed like it was like the longest that we lived in one spot. So I figured, hey, okay, I think we're just going to be here. And then my dad decides to pull a fast one and say, hey, we're going to move again. And so October of '97, we moved to Brooklyn Center, Minnesota. And I've been pretty much here ever since. And so we moved from Brooklyn Center to Coon Rapids. Obviously, I had my share of movements here and there, but then I now live in Blaine. And my family consists of my dad, my mom. My mom actually passed away last year in April, due to health complications and whatnot. But I think that was like the earliest stages of COVID when it kind of hit. So I don't know if they really knew what was really going on, but it was definitely respiratory related that she passed. So that was definitely one of those sad, surreal kind of moments, like is this really happening kind of moments. And then I have an older sister and then 3 younger brothers, and they're all like in their late 20s, and so we're pretty much like up there in age right now. So if you guys can do the math, you guys can figure out maybe how old I am right now. So I'm not gonna really mention that, but you guys can do the math and figure that out. And then so a lot of stuff happened in between to where I am now, which I think we'll probably touch on in a bit here. But that's pretty much my life in a nutshell.
I didn't know that about your mom.
Yeah, that's definitely something that I didn't really broadcast a whole lot. Some people kind of do their own thing. They'll post on Facebook or they'll do different things. I was only on Facebook, to be honest, because when I went to the Peace Corps, that was the only way I could connect to people. Otherwise, I think they had like Zanga back in the day, which was like an online diary kind of thing. Yeah, that was the thing. And people were forcing me to do different things. And I clearly remember I was really upset with my friends because they told me to go on Zanga. I go on Zanga and then they flipped the script and it went over to like Facebook. And I'm like, y'all just ditched me. Like, what the heck? But no, Facebook was the only way to communicate. But people had different ways of expressing. And to me, I just kind of kept it close to the chest. Kind of kept it close. I didn't really say a whole lot. My siblings might have been a little bit different, but to me, it was just something that I didn't really mention a whole lot. Even work was like trying to in some ways like push me in terms of what was going on because I was missing time. And not that they were really prying, but they were just kind of like, hey, we just kind of need to know what's going on. So eventually I just eventually told work, and I didn't really want to at the same time. So eventually an email went out, and my close coworkers reached out and all that stuff. So that was really cool for them to do that.
Recently I've been thinking about some close friends of mine who have lost someone, and some of them some of them are men, and I want to just pick your brain a little bit on I think for a lot of men, and I'm not saying it's you, right?
Mm-hmm.
But I'm just thinking of the men in my life, and I noticed that though they've communicated to me, what's happened, they're definitely in a long process of grieving, and almost like I keep hearing the word of I need time with it, but I can't find time for it.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't know that you moved so many times, and
yeah.
and you were born in France. Can you speak French?
Yeah, it's I don't want to say that it's broken, but the I don't even know what the meaning of it, but the uses of verbs, tenses, because French, if you took French in high school, maybe even in college, the way that they break it down, there's a lot of different tenses, right? That's my only problem, I think, for the most part, using the right and correct tense for future, past tense, future, whatever it is. Like, that's probably my only issue. I mean, I speak enough probably to get by. It might not be grammatically correct, but I think if they can grasp the subject that I'm trying to say, I think we're good. The other issue also, I think, is if they speak really fast, which sometimes they do, I can miss what they're trying to say. So if they kind of if they slow down a little bit, I think we're good. But no, I still speak. I think my sister, I think my dad might still know a little bit. My sister for sure. Me, I think that's pretty much it. I think my other brother after me probably has forgotten the French.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm still good. I've had a few conversations at work in French, and to kind of explain Social Security matters, which is ridiculous, but I was able to just kind of keep it simple for myself. But yeah, no, I think if I were to speak with someone, I think we'd be okay. I might not understand a whole lot, but I think we'd be okay.
That's amazing. I've been to France. When I lived in Hong Kong, it was a lot closer, right? So
yeah.
So we went to France, and we didn't go to Paris because it was too far north, but we were like in Nice.
Yeah, you were all the way down there by the Mediterranean. Wow, yeah.
Because the goal was Italy. Sorry.
Okay.
We had to pick, we're like,
sure.
So it was like which romantic holiday, do you want the French one or do you want the Italian one, So
well, what season? Because it was maybe depend.
It was Christmas and New Year that year.
Okay.
We were able to spend that. Yeah.
Okay. Because I would assume Italy would be a lot warmer, because I know France does go through snow. So I think if it's winter, it would have been kind of cold. So I think Italy would have been a better country to visit.
Yeah,
the winter time.
It snowed when we got into Venice.
Oh, okay.
So everything that I had seen in pictures and in the movies, I was like, wait, this isn't the Venice that I know. So do a little research before you travel. No, right. No. And then you were in Wisconsin for like a longer period?
5 years. 5 years.
Okay. All right. And what was the name of that town?
Holmen. Holmen.
All right. Yeah, I just wanted to, give shout outs out to to the residents or those of you that are living in Holman, Wisconsin. All right.
Nice.
And then you found yourself in Brooklyn Center, BC,
Yep.
of all places. I grew up in
Yeah.
BC. I grew up in BC.
Okay. Whoa, not really.
Yeah,
Interesting. Did not know that.
about 3 or 4 blocks from the high school.
Yeah. We were at the apartment complex, not that far away either. Just up like Humboldt by the gas stations or wherever that they had over there.
Where the police station is now?
No, a little bit further. Like I guess it would be what, north? I think it would be a little bit north.
Okay.
Yeah. But we were
Wow.
on that Humboldt Street at those apartment complexes down the road a little bit. Yeah.
You know that shopping center? That I mean.
Yeah. Right across. We were right across from there.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, we used to go. A lot of memories there. There was a video store called Main Street
Yeah.
Video, and
Okay.
there was a donut shop. Even though I didn't drink coffee, when I
Yeah.
was little, but so yeah, it's a lot of memories. Our like a family friend owned the Chinese restaurant in there.
Yeah. I think
So
that's still there.
is this still there?
Yeah, I think it's still there.
Man, I heard that during the was it during the trial, the Derek Chauvin trial?
Yeah.
It was really really intense over there.
Yep,
area,
Yep.
so,
I think
yeah.
one time I drove. I think definitely after that. I think I just drove on Humboldt, and yeah, they were definitely in that strip mall. The stores were definitely boarded up.
Yeah.
And that there was graffiti and all that stuff on there too. But yeah, I think it was around that time that happened. I think there was I don't want to say rioting, but looting and all that stuff happening definitely around that time of the Chauvin trial.
Yeah.
Yep.
So it's just really interesting, like places that you grew up kind of I mean, I haven't been back in a long time, but just kind of how it changes and how something stays the same too. Where did you go for high school then?
So I went to Brooklyn Center High School.
You did?
Yep.
Oh.
Yep. So pretty much from sophomore through senior year, went there. Went to the U. I think in 2002, I think is when we moved to Coon Rapids.
Okay.
And yeah, so I think so in 2002 we moved to Coon Rapids. My parents had been there for up until they moved in with me for the most part in 2018. So,
would you say that growing up, did you carry a lot of the tradition, or was your family a little bit more not so traditional, or I'm just
Yeah, I mean, that was tough. I think definitely they were traditional, but then eventually at some point they went into kind of like that middle of like, if we'll do traditional, if that doesn't work, we'll go into modern. If that doesn't work, we'll go back. So there was a lot of back and forth because eventually church was something that my parents kind of got into at some point. But again, when something needed that traditional Hmong cultural aspect of it, they kind of fell back on that. I'm sure my dad tried, and maybe he might still try to kind of get us to do different things that are more culturally related. I don't know if it's our assimilation here in the States that we're kind of slowly pushing back, and obviously there's a lot of talk right now in within the Hmong community itself. I'm sure that the youth maybe not having enough lessons being taught, that sort of stuff, or not really wanting to learn all this stuff. But there were I remember growing up that my dad was like bringing me to like these gatherings and whatnot just to kind of maybe observe a little bit. But I don't know, and this is kind of where maybe I don't have that experience of in terms of having a parent or parents kind of really teach you, I guess, the Hmong cultural stuff. I don't know if my dad was really that kind of a hands-on in terms of teaching all that stuff to us. I think my mom, I mean, for sure, I think my older sister being the oldest one, got the brunt of that stuff about the Hmong culture and traditions and whatnot. And I think for me, it was more of like, let me observe and, maybe if I can, absorb that in and then, continue on that. But most of the time, I think it was just kind of actually learning about being Hmong. That kind of started like here in Minnesota. Fresno, even though Fresno is a huge, Hmong population there, that wasn't really a focus. But I didn't really know Hmong until coming to Minnesota.
So how old were you about when that was?
So when I came here, sophomore year, that's like what,
Oh,
15, 16? Yeah.
okay. So you were
Yeah.
like a teenager already.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. What was your experience like as far as being Hmong, but then also being raised in America? Was it smooth for you, or like did you like? I'm just curious about a little bit about your thoughts about
Yeah.
that.
It's I don't know. Like it's hard to describe it in words.
Hmm.
Usually the way that I would just describe it is just kind of telling the story and then have people just kind of come up, in terms of how I got to where I'm now, kind of, making their own opinions about, my life for
Hmm.
the most part. And so, just kind of moving here, obviously I was 7, so I didn't really know anything, just kind of followed my parents. If they went somewhere, I went somewhere, right? Um, once we got to, Fresno, the French language kind of stopped. And then we had to learn
Hmm.
Hmong at home and then English through ESL classes at school. So I had to, I simultaneously learned 2 different languages, but at the same time, apparently is that, you know, when in France, when our parents spoke to us in Hmong, we would understand it, but we would always reply in French. And
Hmm.
so we at least understood, the language, is that we just never really spoken it. I don't know if it was because, maybe we were too shy to speak, or we just, maybe didn't want to. And so obviously when we got to Fresno, then it was like, Hmong at home, because my cousins were there too, and so we were just kind of speaking with them, and then we had to speak English, at school.
Hmm.
um, but I think overall it was just kind of like, a just new environment to just kind of take in.
Hmm.
um, the funny thing is that, again, like, coming to Minnesota is kind of when I really, maybe no, I should say coming to Wisconsin was when I was more aware of, maybe race and skin color, so to speak, right? And
Hmm.
then being Hmong was more of like when I came here to Minnesota. Otherwise, in Fresno, I was just kind of like, hey, I got friends, and that's who they were to me. They were just friends, whether they were, Asian, black, white, Hispanic. They were just friends to me, right? I didn't really see that. But obviously, growing up, you kind of start opening your eyes to different things. And, once we got to home in Wisconsin, that's kind of when I really kind of, took notice of, race and skin color and whatnot.
Hmm.
But then being Hmong, yeah, definitely was more of like figuring that out here with, my friends that I met in high school, seeing the stuff through their eyes and, stories and whatnot. That's kind of when everything kind of started, coming together for me.
I'm starting to see the connection as to you seem like culture and traveling and moving around, right?
Hmm. Yeah.
Is not it's like it's something that it seems like it's a part of you,
Yeah.
so
Hmm.
and you seem to be comfortable with that, and kind of seeing what experiences come your way,
Yep.
from that. What led you to study at University of Minnesota?
They were close to home. That
Yeah.
was pretty much it. You know, uh, you know, I'm definitely not gonna brag, but I got into St. Cloud, but I also got
Oh.
into UW Madison. And then for the most part, one of my thought was, okay, who's gonna send me more information about their school, right? The only college university that I visited for like the campus tour stuff
Uh-huh.
was UW Madison. I never went to the U to do that whole campus stuff. I never went to St. Cloud. UW Madison was the only one that I actually went to. But at some point, I was kind of like, okay, who's gonna really reach out for me to really, say, hey, Albert, come here, right?
Mm.
Granted, the U's in my backyard, so obviously they have easier access to me. But St. Cloud sent a few things here and there. Madison's sent a few things here and there. But the U definitely kind of sent more things. And I think eventually that kind of made my decision in terms of I'll go to the U, and plus it was close to home because I felt like I still needed to be close to family. Um, but definitely a piece of me is kind of like, man, what would have happened if I went to UW Madison? I didn't even think about even St. Cloud, but I'm like, what if I went to UW Madison? How would that have changed, right? But yeah, so it was pretty much information about the schools, whatever they sent to me to know more about the school,
Mhm.
was eventually going to be one of the decisions that uh, was going to impact my decision to go there.
Mm. And then what did you end up studying at U of M?
So yeah, so I went in as a biology sort of student, I guess. that was definitely something that was more, forced onto me, I guess.
Oh.
I don't know if you caught the little spiel that I had when we had the school meeting, a career
Mhm.
day, but I told him that I actually had a higher interest in astronomy, right?
Mm.
But then eventually I took a class. I took like intro to astronomy, and it definitely wasn't like what I thought it was gonna be. It had more numbers than visuals, I guess is what it was. But then eventually, um,
Mm.
I got talking to by my dad's nephew about, hey, yeah, that's like the wrong field. You should go into something medical. And I'm like, yeah, okay, whatever. So I went into my freshman year, kind of have with that focus of biology. But again, my sophomore year, um, I diverted from that and just kind of, explored different things with
Mhm.
different classes. Reading like the intro classes and the description and all that stuff. I'm like, wow, this is really interesting. Um, and then I went into more of like the social sciences than anything, and um, I think that's definitely something that's more me, in
Mm.
terms of, it's more of like that social aspect that I love about everything.
What do you love about it?
It's just the interaction, that I
Mm.
have with people, and you know, I it's I don't want to say that it's really everything, because obviously the bad ones you want to forget, because you know those are the bad ones. They ruin your day, that those kind of
Mm.
thing. But even those have their own experiences, to be honest. But definitely the positive ones. If you can impact somebody's life, by just giving them advice, and just seeing, telling them, hey, this is some things that happened in my life. I don't know if this is going to translate into yours, but this is how I've handled different things. Just kind of having that one-on-one
Mhm.
situation is definitely something that I enjoy. I definitely don't mind the big groups either, but the big groups, I kind of feel that maybe one voice or two might not be heard in that situation, but those smaller groups, the more one-on-ones, those are the ones that I strive for, because they're more meaningful to me. Because then you just
Mm.
kind of have each other's attention at that point, to be heard, to just discuss anything. I think it's just kind of more important for me in terms of just being able to share with
Mm.
each other in terms of what you have.
Right now, I'm reading the Book of Joy.
Hmm.
Are you familiar with that one?
No.
The author wrote it. I believe he's a journalist, but anyways, he decided to follow the Dalai Lama,
Okay.
and then the Archbishop Desmond Tutu from South Africa.
Okay.
Um, and it's all about their interaction, and they spend like a week together, and like they're just talking about certain principles and certain uh share certain stories. And what one of the things that keeps repeating in the book is that humans were not wired to 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 do things just for ourselves,
Hmm.
right? Like I believe that I think the word is interdependence.
Hmm.
um but they 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 share a lot about, if people would just focus on uh recognizing that, that life is like, to find joy in life is to connect to other human beings,
Hmm. Yep.
right? And no matter what, like, that should be that should be your focus, and it should be something that's like effortless,
Hmm. Yeah.
like that. So I really enjoy reading that book, because it's talking about the importance of that. And because in the world, it's like it's there's so many messages of, I need to go do this for myself, or I need to take care of this just for me. And we're getting further and further away from that. Not saying that we are, but I just feel
Hmm.
like when I'm reading that book, it reminds me of like, oh, okay, that's why, like what you're just saying, when you're interacting with people, it I like to use nourishes,
Hmm.
right? But maybe even fulfillment, like we
Yeah.
find fulfillment in that. And it's nothing that we have to, like, we can do it at any time,
Hmm.
right? But it's a choice. How was college then? Was How did it turn out?
Yeah, I mean, college was interesting, you know. I think it was definitely not something that I thought about. You know, my
Mm.
dad was actually the one saying, "Hey, you know, you graduate now, you got to go to college." I'm like, "Oh yeah, I guess I got to do that, right?" Because otherwise, I didn't really think about what I was going to do after I graduated high school, you know, to be honest. And
Oh,
so,
right.
you know, once I got to college, it was more of like, you know, kind of that, you know, going back to, you know, studying and all that stuff. But I definitely, you know, I definitely feel like I took advantage of college,
Mm.
not so much in a good way, but in a bad way of, you know, because of the freedom that I was, right? You know, I lived on campus my first year, and I lived on campus my either fourth or fifth year there. I think my fourth year. But they had a lot of, you know, individual moments, you know, that
Mm.
I might have taken advantage of, and not really focused on the school aspect of it. Um, because again, you know, once eventually I got involved with, you know, HMSA and whatnot, like it was just kind of like, hey, you know, there's, you know, other people that could, you know, that I can interact with, right? And so, you know, I think just kind of the whole thing with college was, you know, I'll go to classes because I have to go to classes. You know, I'll learn what I have to learn, you know, do the tests and all that stuff, but eventually at the end of the day, like I want to, you know, interact with people, you know, what, you know, the ones in HMSA, that's going to be, you know, what I really enjoy, right? I was never really involved, you know, with discussions in classrooms and whatnot. But again, you know, during that career day, I think the one thing that I told everyone was I didn't really learn how to go through college until it was like my fourth or fifth year, you know, because then I really knew, okay, this is what you actually have to do. This is how you can take notes better. This is, you know, how you can approach being a student better, that sort of thing. You know, the involvement just kind of helps motivate you some more to still be, you know, obviously in college and to kind of still pursue, you know, your degree. But, you know, this is how you can become a student, or this is how you should be a student at that point. And you know, whether it was, you know, a late blooming of, you know, of knowledge of that, it definitely came late, because again, you know, I just did things naturally. I guess just, you know, my first 3 years is, you know, this is just school. You wake up, go to class, come back, eat, you know, rest, you know, sleep, repeat kind of thing, right? But yeah, the whole, you know, being a student thing was, you know, definitely in the later stages of my college careers. Um, and yeah, those, you know, those 5 years went by quick. But I don't know if I really took the time also though to really look at myself in terms of, you know, growth, you know,
Mm.
because you know, I just took it, you know, a year at a time or a semester at a time. You know, you go through a semester, you have to register, you know, for the next semester, do all that kind of stuff. You know, summer comes around, most likely you're hanging with HMSA folks, until the next school year. But I think for sure it might have been a, you know, a struggle in some ways if I didn't have HMSA, or if I didn't push myself to be involved, with something. Because even after high school, you know, because I got involved at some point once I got comfortable, you know, once I, you know, was able to meet people, I got involved and that was really enjoyable. And I told myself, you know, when you go to college, if you can, like, you know, stay involved. And
Mm.
again, I didn't know what college had to offer. You know, I didn't know what college was like. And you know, if you have listeners who are maybe, you know, seniors in high school, maybe taking, you know, a few AP classes, if you have to go to community college or at the, you know, U or something like that, just to kind of experience that campus feel, because campus feeling is, it's amazing, man. Like I love being on campus. It's like it's this thing of just, you know, if you sit down and just observe, you know, people, you know, that's like that's amazing. I love people watching, you know, and I don't mind just sitting on the grass at the U and just kind of watching people. Maybe skip a class or two just to do that. But don't do that, folks. Don't skip class. Go to class. But no, you know, without HMSC, I think, you know, it would have been strange, because, you know, who would I have interacted with in terms of those who become my friends now? You know, like they would have never really been in my life, and for the most part, I don't even know if I would have even gone to Peace Corps at that point, right? If I didn't have HMSC to be so involved.
Right.
But you know, it was definitely its own experience. You know, going to the U, going through those 5 years, you know, learning, you know, everything that I've lost now, you know, that sort of
Mm.
thing. But yeah, no, college was great, man. Like I don't think I would be able to do, you know, grad school now, just because the way mentally, the way I am at right now, like I just don't think I can learn. You know, I don't think I have that kind of patience to try and, you know, do, you know, uh one nighters, you know, exams, essay. I don't think mentally I'm there for that. And so, you know, is it still an option? It's like a distant 3 or 4, you know. but you can never be too old to go back to school. I mean, I feel like I'm still, well, I should say, I feel like I look young enough that if I were just to stroll through the U, like I'd fall, I could go, I could pass by as a student, right?
Yeah.
Just go to a random class and sit down. But you don't want to take advantage of that free education or something like that. But no, college was great, man. It was definitely its own experience for sure.
So you enjoyed college for the interaction. So then, like, the studying and the those
Mm-hmm.
whether if it was late night, cramming or whatever, getting preparing, for the tests and that kind of stuff, you were able to endure that because you enjoyed like the interaction with people, like
Yeah, I
was
mean
yeah
that definitely. I mean, again, that kind of helped, but at some point also, I think, and again, this is definitely things that I don't even think about, right? You just kind of do it, right? Because
yeah
it's a responsibility that you have as a student. If a deadline is coming up that you have to study for a test, then you kind of have to put in that time, and But again, I think the interactions with people is kind of like that motivation to continue.
Mm,
Because again, if I didn't have that, who knows? Maybe I would have dropped out after a year or two, right? I don't really know, but because at some point I'm like, hey, on Friday I know I'm gonna have an HMSA meeting. Look forward to that. Do what you need to do Monday through Thursday, or through at least Friday, anyways, just to get through that, and then you get to interact, right? But at the same time, no, definitely you still have some form of responsibility,
mm,
as a student, to make sure that you're not just kind of putting things together overnight, right? You still kind of have to put some form of effort into
yeah
at least studying, researching, whatever it is that you have to do, to make sure that things get completed. They have deadlines, or they extend deadlines every now and then, but at the same time, it's like, you know, still you should kind of put in the work for that as a student, because you know it's just something that in terms of the responsibility that you have, maybe just as a human being overall, trying to
mm,
learn more about a certain subject or even about yourself, just to kind of put in that time.
mm. All right, so then what happened after you graduated?
Yep, so I graduated in '05, and then I pretty much just worked for the next 5 years. um, and I think the one thing to keep in mind is this whole time I'm only like a permanent resident at this point, right?
Hmm.
I haven't even gone through my citizenship stuff, right?
Oh, wow.
Yeah, yeah. So, um, eventually the connection to everything was, at some point I went through like the student union, and they had, how they always have informational booths and things like that with people standing there. That's kind of when I eventually went across like the Peace Corps stuff, right? Um, but that's gonna come later in this conversation, I'm sure. So
Hmm.
the next 5 years after I graduated, I just kind of worked. I worked at Imagine Print Solutions. Just kind of, it was a company that did a lot of advertising, printing for the most part. So those big boards that you might see like in Walmart or Target that says, hey, it has a picture of like the girl with the clothes and whatever. So they kind of printed those things. So they had different accounts with different companies: Best Buy, Target, General Mills, a lot of companies, big companies in Minnesota, that they were kind of contracted through to kind of make these different products for them.
Mhm.
And so my department was more of like the little things, stickers on, the Schweigert, sausage or something like that, that sort of thing. That was what my department was for. So I pretty much did that for 5 years, just to kind of, get some income in. I didn't really know what else I was gonna do, to
Mm.
be honest. I just thought maybe I'm just gonna work and that was just gonna be it. And then at some point, I think in what 2007, at some point, I think my friend Ben, you remember Ben Moore, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So eventually, we talked a little bit, and he was like, hey, are you, what's going on with Peace Corps? Are you gonna do that? And I think that's kind of like, that was the jolt, right? That kind of started everything. I was like, man, like, yeah, I should get back into that. And I think my sister at the time was working through a sort of immigration office, and so
Mm.
she gave us the heads up of like, hey, the fee to apply for citizenship is going to go up. So if you guys want to do that, you guys should do that now. And so things eventually started falling together, towards like, in like, 04, 05, 06.
Hmm.
No, sorry, I'm sorry. 07, 08 or so. Maybe even earlier than that. My time, is probably wrong, but at some point
Yeah.
I'm like, yeah, I should get on these things, you know. So yeah, so during after college, it was working and getting my naturalization completed, and then eventually applying to Peace Corps.
So then you had to do the citizenship first in order to join Peace Corps. Is that?
Yes, yep. Because you pretty much have to be a U.S. citizen to do Peace Corps. If you still had your permanent residency, you could do AmeriCorps, which is more like in the States, or at least in U.S. territories, anyways.
Yeah.
But Peace Corps, obviously being more of like a global organization, like they require you to be a U.S. citizen for that.
Mm. And then what did you have to do for the citizenship? Like,
So you pretty much just so let's see. So you obviously you apply for it. You pay the fee. You take a basic like history test. That's actually not that simple, to be honest. Like if you never took history class, you're gonna struggle. Like I mean, it's simple. It's simple questions once you take it. Like who's president, who's vice president. But if you don't pay attention to that stuff, like that could be difficult. I mean, just think about our parents that have to go through that test. They might not pay attention to all that stuff, but they kind of study for it, and then eventually they pass. But yeah, so I had to go through the testing, and then I had to go through an interview, which again, they just kind of tell you like simple things like, write this sentence or read this paragraph. You do fingerprinting. And then eventually at the very end, if everything passes, then you go through the ceremony, raise your right hand or left hand or whatever it is, say whatever it is that's, on the teleprompter or whatever like that. And then you get your certificate.
Yeah, my brother-in-law, he got his. He's from Indonesia, so I remember.
Yeah, it's a long process. I mean, my process was what 8-9 months, maybe. My brother was definitely a lot shorter than that, but mine was about 7, 8, 9 months until I actually got from like beginning to applying to the actual ceremony itself.
Yeah, I heard about the test, and I was just like, wow, there's stuff that people that grew up here don't even know.
Yeah.
So do they give you something to study, or is it just random stuff?
I don't even know, because I want to say that my dad kind of had the study guide, right? Like, okay. So I'm trying to think like how I studied for it. I definitely didn't go in there blind. I still had to look over it because I didn't know some of the answers, right?
Yeah.
But I think my dad kind of kept a study guide. I'm sure I kind of reviewed it a little bit here and there. I mean, I think the questions are only like 10, 15, 20, maybe not even that much. But again, like, it's pretty much questions from the study guide.
Okay.
So they're not going to really trick you up or anything like that, but they just want to make sure that you're, understanding maybe the three branches of the government, who the president, vice president, who's your, local governor, that sort of thing. And so, yeah, so I mean, again, like if you don't really pay attention to that, that's hard stuff, man. And again, just thinking about, parents, of, immigrants that have to go through that testing, like who maybe might not have that education that we've gone through, right? Like they somehow they pass it,
Yeah.
So to me, I'm like, shoot, I better pass it the first time. My parents did it. Like, I better do it.
And then after you got your citizenship, you were like, I'm ready to go, or?
Yeah. So let's see. So I think I want to say I got it in 07. I think I got it in 07. 08 was just kind of like a sort of just a 1 year to kind of maybe really think things through. Maybe start the application process itself. Late 08, I think. And I think I got accepted, I think sometime in 09. I don't know what part of 09, but I got accepted in 09, and then eventually I left in 2010 in March. So yeah, so pretty much, eventually I just kind of had like very short time to just kind of, maybe just really hang out with friends and family, because I was gonna, be gone in a year, and years fly by quick sometimes. And so by the time I knew where I was gonna go, I was kind of like, all right, now this is for real now.
Did you pick where you were going, or did they pick for you?
They picked for me. So the process that it is now compared to my time is definitely different. My time was just like list, 4 places that you want to go, areas, not so much country specific, but maybe continents or something like that. List, your top choices, and then they just kind of like, mix and match different things, and then boom, you just kind of go somewhere. Nowadays, and I think this started back, a few years ago, but now you can actually pick where you want to go and what you want to do. But obviously, it's got to fall within your, maybe like your major and your activities and what you've had experience in. You just can't pick something out of nowhere. If you've done a lot of like health related stuff, most likely you're gonna fall into a health. You just can't go do some other stuff, right? Unless some sort of exceptions or anything like that. But now the positions are more like what is it, like job ads, so they have like position, maybe possible requirements, the description. Before it was just kind of like, hey, give us some choices, and then we'll figure that out for you.
We'll plug you in.
Yep.
Wow. Okay, that's interesting. Huh. So then you found yourself going to I don't know, am I pronouncing it right? Senegal?
Senegal, West Africa. Yes, sir.
And you were stationed there.
Yep.
Tell us about that. Tell us. Yeah.
Yeah, the more important thing in my life right now. Yeah, Peace Corps, man. Yeah, I could go off. We could do a different broadcast just about Peace Corps, really, if we wanted to. I got accepted, ready to leave March 2010, literally a day after my birthday, or before my birthday, I should say. Left, and we had like a day and a half of orientation, I guess, in DC. So I left. I think my flight was like super early because we had to be there at like 9 o'clock Eastern time, and so I had to leave like here like 5 a.m. just to catch a flight over there, right? And so I woke up, it was super early, and my siblings were still kind of asleep. My parents woke up. I remember, I think my mom was like, just make sure you go do things well, in the Hmong way, so to speak. Just go be, a good person over there. And so that was definitely, something that I was like, man, like I'm actually doing this. Like I'm actually going. Like I have my huge luggage, right? I'm like, I'm actually going. And so yeah, so we had a day and a half of orientation in DC, and then pretty much flew the 8 hours across the Atlantic, landed in Senegal. Super. I didn't even sleep at all over the flight. I don't know if it was just like the excitement or whatever it is. We touched down in the car at the airport. They were all there to kind of greet us. We went through everything, went to the training center. Again, I don't even have any sleep time at this point. 8 hours straight. I was just playing like bookworm or something like that on the plane, doing something. And yeah, so I'm 8 hours just kind of awake. We right off the bat, we go into these different sessions at the training center there in Senegal. The training itself is 2.5 months. And it's split between time at the training center and then time with the host family that's nearby. And so with the family, it's more of like language training and cultural trainings and things like that, speaking with them, just interacting with them, and then going to language classes. At the training center, it was more technical stuff in terms of what you could do as a health volunteer or as an education environmental volunteer, what you can do and things like that. A couple of cultural sessions here and there, videos, talking to the staff, that sort of thing. And then after training, you what we call, you swear in as a volunteer at the U.S. Embassy. And then after that, you kind of off into your actual village, somewhere in the country.
Now, before this, how much did you know about West Africa, or more specifically Senegal?
Zero. I knew nothing. The only thing that I was eventually glad once I did the research was they were a coastal country. So I'm like, okay, I'm not landlocked. Once I knew I was, in Africa, I was like, I know Africa has a lot of like landlocked, countries, right? I was like, just don't let me be like in the middle of nowhere. Even though Senegal, you could be in the middle of nowhere either. But once I kind of looked it up, I'm like, oh, okay, it's on the kind of like the panhandle. It's there. It's on the coast. Okay, I'm good with that. At least I have some, free air, to kind of go to if I needed to. but I didn't think I was gonna travel, Senegal really, and see the coast and all that stuff. But no, I didn't know anything. I think I went to like Barnes and Noble frequently just to kind of look up, I guess just the books about Africa, but then looking at the section of Senegal, or maybe even looking if they had books about Senegal. So I definitely spent some time in Barnes and Noble just to kind of look up what it was like, what people had said about it. Um, food was a big thing because being a sort of like slim guy that I am, like I'm really picky with food. I've accepted that I'm really picky with food. And so I'm like, okay, what do they eat over there, right? And this is where the lie came in, right? So the lie was pretty much like, oh yeah, they have fish, chicken, goat, pork, and all that stuff. I'm like, oh, okay, I'm good. I have variety. I'm good. But eventually, fish is the main dish. And if you have money that you could buy chicken and the other meats, or when there's a celebration, that's when the meats come in. Otherwise, you're eating fish. So I didn't really know that until I got to Senegal, and I'm like, wait, y'all lied to me. I thought I was gonna get all this variety, but fish is like the daily meal. So I don't eat seafood in general. So I was kind of like, oh, fish. Okay, this is gonna be interesting. Obviously, I got used to it, and I loved it being over there. I don't eat it here because we have more variety, so I choose not to eat it, over here in America. But that was the one thing for sure that I wanted to make sure I was going to be okay with in terms of the food. Obviously, there was more things that came around once I did more, in country, traveling and things like that in terms of what was available. But food was one thing. I wasn't too concerned about anything else. I think, to be honest, I think food was the main thing. I already knew it was going to be hot just for the fact that it was Africa. And Africa is just normally hot. But yeah, I think with the people, it's kind of like let's just wait till we get there to figure that out with the people. But I definitely had a few things that I had to make sure. Okay, does Senegal have this or that? Right? I kind of had to just double check on that, and food was on top of the list. But I had no idea where it was. Had no idea where it was. Had to look it up, do all the kind of like, personal research on that.
Fish is a good thing.
Yeah.
So you didn't eat seafood before, but you're not allergic to it. You weren't allergic to it.
So I don't want to say that I hate it. I just haven't tried it. I never really got myself to try it. And so I never really, as far as I know, I don't have any allergies to anything. I think because fish is just the way that it's prepped sometimes, it just looks raw. And I think that just does something to me, right? With hot dogs are cooked, right? It's different, right? It doesn't have a pig's head or anything like that, right? Burgers are cooked, right? So I don't need to. But the fish, you could get served the fish the way that it's caught, right? And I think that throws me off a little bit sometimes. And so I'm kind of like, I'm good. You bring in a lobster, it's still the lobster. It's not broken to meat or anything like that, right? So I think the fact that it's still kind of like the shape of the actual, sea creature, I think that's the one part that I'm kind of like, I'm not gonna try to dig into that fish while it's still a fish, If you break it down into like a fish sandwich, maybe I'll eat that,
Did they cook it? Did they prepare it cooked, or how did they prepare it?
Yeah, they cook it. They definitely get it fresh. So my actual village, the women, not the men, the women would actually go up to the road. The fish truck would come down. He'll bring out like a few crates of like fish, and they just bargain. They just bargain for a price. Once they come up with a price, it gets divvied up by by the families. But it's fresh, and then because there's no refrigeration per se unless you really have money, so everything has to be done. If they do refrigerate it, they definitely have their own way of doing that. But I've never really seen that because I never really went into the kitchen. Because I guess my role as a man, I couldn't really be in the kitchen sort of thing. So I didn't really observe that stuff. But for sure, they don't have refrigeration unless you really have the money to buy that. So everything that you get has to kind of be done right away. It's pretty much, I guess you could say it's a combination of boiling the fish. Sometimes they'll cook it over fire. But definitely they, sometimes it's just like the fish over rice. And that's like really basic. Maybe a few beans sprinkled over it. But on Fridays was the day. Friday is like their their prayer day, right? So they get dressed up, it's super fancy. It's kind of like an event. So then they bust out the fish over the rice with some beans, with some vegetables, cassava, cabbage, carrots, maybe I mean, it's a good looking bowl, man. Like it's delicious. But Monday through Thursday, you just get the fish and some beans. And so I eventually figured that out. That okay, Friday is the day. So if anything else, you save yourself for Friday.
Wait, what do you mean save yourself? What do you mean?
Well, not really save yourself, but I guess on that day, on Friday itself, if you don't eat anything, just kind of like save yourself for the meal because it's gonna be good. You're gonna have all this extra vegetable because usually they don't eat vegetables, right? And that's something that as house volunteers or as environmental education volunteers, we try to strive. But again, because it's an extra cost, like they don't want to try and do that. So if they could just get the fish, beans might be something more, affordable for them. And obviously the rice is, plentiful. So they'll just get that Monday through Thursday, unless they decide, hey, let's spice it up a little bit, on a Wednesday or something like that. Then they'll do something. But usually Friday for sure is when they bust out with, additional vegetables, and it just looks like a full meal, man.
Well, if you have any photos, or if you can like share with me photos of what that meal looks like, I'd love to see that.
Oh yeah, no, I do. It's somewhere on my thumb drive somewhere. But yeah, no, I definitely have pictures, man. I took pictures of that for sure, in case people needed to see it. But yeah, at some point here, at some point, well, I'll share that with you for sure.
Well, that's really cool. Wow, I love hearing. I mean, that's the thing about traveling. It's like I love hearing people's experiences, or when I'm sharing about my experiences. Because you wouldn't know unless you were actually there.
Yep.
Right. Or I mean, the closest thing would be talking to somebody who's from there, and then they can share with you, but then the experience is not the same because now it's a part of you.
Yeah.
Besides eating fish.
Yeah.
and some other fantastic stuff on Fridays. What were you doing during your stay there? And how long did you stay there?
I was there for 3 years.
Wow.
Yeah. Yep.
That's a good chunk. Wow.
The Peace Corps contract is actually just 2 years. And so depending on what's going on, if you have like an additional project you wanted to continue or finish up, you could extend. And I took a vacation back to the States in the middle of my transition from year 1 to year 2. And the one thing I always say about us being human is how quickly sometimes we can assimilate to a culture or just to kind of understand a culture, and how much that can take over what you already know as yourself, right? And so just being there for a year, like I already took in so much of like their way of life, right? Greeting is a huge thing with them. Like if you just go straight up just talking about stuff, they're going to be like, look, you got to greet me first. Like people, like it can be offensive to them sometimes if you just kind of start rambling about stuff and not greet them, right? So, even nowadays, like when I'm making a phone call at work, like I'm calling my appointment, I'm greeting them, right? Because that's just something that's now ingrained of me greeting someone all the time, because it was really important to them. And eventually I took that as like an importance to me now too. Right?
Can you give me an example of what you mean by greeting?
Yep. So pretty much, when you greet each other, you're pretty much, asking about everything that's going on, right? So you start off with Assalamu alaikum, alaikum assalam, Naka wakari, how's your family? How's this going? How's the goats? How's the field? That could go on for minutes, right? And then from there, you can kind of start asking your questions, right? So the greeting is very important. So it's not just hey, how are you, and then everything just stops. It's like you're asking about your family, you're asking about the work, you're asking about everything else that's going on before you can actually get into the actual conversation that you want. And so the one example I always share is we were going on our own to a different training site, right? And so I got dropped off, and I'm like, crap, I don't know where I'm going. So I see these two guys at the gas station. So I'm like, I'm just gonna go ask them, where this one place is. And I approached them and I'm like, hey, where's this place at? And then the guy was like, hey, are you gonna greet me first? And I was like, oh no, the taboo of the country, right? And so we greet each other, and then eventually I talked to them, and then they were like, yep, it's over there. And so that's one thing that's like really important, with them is, the greeting aspect. So when you approach someone, you always got to greet.
Thanks for sharing that. That's amazing. And I think something that we could all learn from, is the importance of greeting someone, the importance of asking someone about them before we ask about ourselves. So did you have to speak the language there, or?
Yep. So
Yeah.
Senegal itself is a francophone country. So French is kind of like the main language. But once you get away from the bigger cities into more rural areas in terms of, villages, that especially the one that I was in, it gets broken down into local languages. And so the north has its own kind of language dialect. The middle has its own. The southeast has kind of their own language. And so at some point during training, based on your, I guess, your French acumen or so, you get put into a certain language. And so supposedly Wolof, which is the language that I learned, was if your French was kind of like not too good. And so when I got into Wolof, I'm like, what are you talking about? My French is like on the expert level, right? I was like really upset when I got that, but it is what it is. They put me in Wolof, so I'm like, hey, whatever. I'll learn Wolof, and then I can speak my French whenever I need to also. So I had to learn Wolof. So that was my language that I pretty much had to learn during training. Obviously, it even extended beyond training in terms of learning the language, because the one thing that was different about the local language is in training, they teach you the proper way of speaking Wolof, right? But then once you get to your villages, it's pretty much what we volunteers called bush Wolof, which is like they speak in slang, or they'll cut a whole word short, or they'll speak in different words. So sometimes one meaning of one thing can have two different words, and so they might use the secondary one that you don't really learn in your supposedly in training, right? So those are the things that you kind of have to pick up, because if you say one thing that you learn in training to them, they might not know what you're saying because they know it in a different way, in the secondary word. And so you eventually pick all that up. So it's definitely a different learning in terms of the language itself during the actual service, that I was in for those 2 years.
That's so cool. That's so cool. Like when we get to the nitty gritty of people's culture, people's language. Even when I grew up speaking Cantonese, and then people would ask me, how do you say this? And I wouldn't know, because it wasn't in a book. It was what my mom and dad taught me, or what I heard in the family. But then when I went to Hong Kong, man, I heard all kinds of stuff.
Right.
I was like, that's not just slang, that's like a swear word. So,
right.
Did you have like a schedule, or what did you have certain duties, like what
I think it was more duties. Scheduling, they don't follow schedules, man. Like their culture is more of like, we'll do this after tea time, or once we come back from the field is when we do this, or when the sun becomes this point. They kind of follow that kind of, I don't know how to describe that, but those different points of the day, different times and different things that they do during the day, they that's kind of what they follow, right? So when I say, hey, can we meet at 10 o'clock, they don't know that, they don't know what that is. But if I were to say, hey, after tea time or whatever, because tea is like twice a day or something like that, so I'm like, hey, after tea time, before you guys go back to the fields, can we meet? Then they're like, okay, that's fine. But if you say 2 o'clock in the afternoon, they're not gonna know what that is. So schedule wise, there's no set schedule. So don't we eventually, well, I guess what we learn and what I try to translate to people is like, don't try to stay on that so-called American schedule. Like that's not gonna fly, or the Western schedule. It's not gonna fly. You kind of really have to be flexible and learn that they don't go by certain schedules like that. Their own schedule is different, because it's more culturally, or what they do during the day, and that's kind of how they tell when they're going to do something or meet something or someone at a certain time. But overall, my duties as a health extension agent was to really, the main thing was to focus on malaria. Malaria was kind of like the big killer in that country. I think AIDS was probably the second or something like that, but malaria was definitely the one, because sometimes they don't take the necessary precautions to prevent getting malaria. And so, one thing was, making sure that we educate them about that, preventions, different things that, we learned during our training, to maybe if we can find the necessary stuff to teach them about that stuff. So pretty much that was the main thing. Water and sanitation was, a secondary thing that I had to touch on. I think maternal and child health, especially with like, uh, the weight of the baby, that sort of thing. Those were the three kind of main things that I at least had to do some sort of activity in. But then I wasn't just stuck with those three topics. I had what we call, I guess, our secondary activities, which gave us the time to do anything else that we wanted to. I taught, well, I tried teaching a group of boys about American football, right? Because I brought a football with me. That went okay, but there was a lot of, okay, you guys are doing this totally wrong. But they tried, it was good. But they know soccer, their football. They know that more. And I wasn't really good, so I wasn't even going to try with that. And then, I painted, a few murals to kind of make the health hut that was literally in my backyard or next to my compound. I painted murals that were educational murals. So, I painted one about, about AIDS and, the different things that you can do. I painted, a picture of, a pregnant mother, getting, her shots correctly, that sort of thing, just to kind of bring some color, but also some education. So if they do go to the health hut, they can kind of see that visually. And then I think definitely more in my second year was more of like finishing up my projects, but at the same time, traveling to my friends' villages and help them out with their projects. So I helped one of my friends, Emily, with like her America Day, that she just wanted to just kind of showcase different things about America. So I just kind of helped with that. My friend Byron, who was kind of way down south, he was more of like a economic volunteer. So he needed, someone in the health field to kind of help explain the benefits of eating certain vegetables that they were growing at the school. And so he asked me to kind of come down. So I helped them up with the, health lessons and things like that. So my second year was definitely more focused on like, hey, let's just kind of like get out there some more. Whereas the first year was, let's learn about the language and let's get things started.
That is amazing.
Yeah.
The things that you did, like for example, the mural, those were like your own, like you came up with it and
Yep. Yeah. So they give you some ideas of what you can do for your secondary project. So just kind of going back really quickly. So my main project was building latrines, or kind of like these sort of bathrooms for them, right? And so I had one per family compound. So that's something that I created from year 1 to year 2, was create one per family compound. So that was my main thing. I did like a demonstration thing at the local market with the help of my counterpart. So my counterpart is just a host country national that kind of helps you out with different things. So with his help, we did a presentation at the market. I helped out with like this vaccination tourney, going around just kind of vaccinating children under 5. It wasn't really vaccination, but it was just like these little droplets, right? That had the medicine in it. So you just you just press the droplet and then it goes into the kid's mouth. And then you just kind of mark the finger that, hey, they got vaccinated. So I did some of that stuff. So a lot of different health related stuff. My counterpart would just notify me, and then we would just kind of do it together or with the help of somebody else. So that was that. But the secondary stuff was more of like, here's a couple ideas of what you can do. But it was definitely more open in terms of what you wanted to do, because the one thing that when I talk about Peace Corps to people is forget the numbers, right? Forget the schools, forget how many lessons you taught, forget all this stuff. The three main goals of Peace Corps, especially I think the third or the second and the third one, is the relation that you have with each other, right? Teaching the host country nationals about yourself and about America. And then the third goal is pretty much bringing what you learn from the host country nationals and bringing that back to America and sharing it with people. The first goal was just to make sure that we have qualified individuals going, right? So none of those say about, hey, you need to build X amount of, schools, or you need to do, 10,000 lessons during your 2 year. Like that's just for Congress to know, that's just for them to be able to fund the program. But when Kennedy created this program, it was more about world peace. What can you create? What can we do to help the world, right? So to speak. And that's, saying, let's get the right people from America going to all these different places and sharing what America is. They have their own perspective of America. I've had constantly conversation with Senegalese about America, because they think America is one way, but I'm like, no, like America is different ways besides just that. And so it's just sharing with each different countries what each other have, and then kind of spreading that around. And so as much as I talk about my project and things like that, I tend to eventually fall back to, look, the relationships were the more important things to me during my 3 years.
Mm. I learned this saying from my mentor, my best friend, Ubuntu.
Mm-hmm.
Is that a common saying? Have you heard of it before?
What is it?
Ubuntu?
No.
It can be translated in like different ways, but it's, I mean, the way that he described it to me is I am because we are.
Okay.
Right? It's like what what I do affects you, what you do affects me, right?
Yep. Okay.
That it's not just about one person. And that's like my favorite saying, because I think it just kind of sums up one of my strongest values, integrity. And it just so happened that that book I'm reading, the Book of Joy, Desmond Tutu, he has a bracelet kind of like this one.
Okay.
But it says Ubuntu in like EDM candy.
Yeah.
So it's like, oh, okay, all right.
Yeah.
So, but I want to make one that says Ubuntu.
Okay.
There was something that you shared when we did our talk with the kids that I wanted to bring back up and just share with the listeners, because I thought it was pretty fascinating. When was that? Was that early on? That or like what you described to the kids?
Oh,
like,
yeah, the de-stress. Yes.
De-stress. Yeah. Can you tell us about that?
Yeah. So that was just something that I think just kind of happened. And again, definitely during the training, when we were in the training center, because I was around other Americans, it was kind of like, hey, whatever, we're just kind of hanging out. It's all, good and fun, right? But once I'm away from them and I kind of was on my own, it kind of started off with, I came back, I think one time, and I was like, man, like this, like it's hot. I had to learn so many different things today in language class, this and that, and I'm kind of thinking about, maybe family and all that stuff. And then the cool thing about my host family during training was that they kind of had this, patio right on top. And so, I just kind of like, I just went up there and I just kind of like, just exhaled. And I just kind of like stood there and walked around for like 15 minutes. And I felt like that kind of did something, right? It kind of just like, took everything in, but at the same time, I let everything out. And I was like, man, this is cool. And then I went back downstairs and everything was still good, right? And so every day, ever since that point, that's pretty much what I did. So when we went back to the training, villages, after the day, the day was done, especially I think we always ended with language class. So after language class was done, I'd walk back home and then I would just go up there, just kind of like, let it go for about 20 minutes or so, and then just kind of go back down and start interacting with the family. And again, the one thing for sure, I was like, man, I got to do something like this once I go to my actual village. And the good thing about my little hut situation is that I had my own backyard. And so it was kind of private because they had the fence up and everything. And so at the end of the day, probably before I showered or something like that, go up there, plug in the headphones, listen to music, and just kind of like let it go, and just kind of, say, okay, today, we did this and that, if this was rough, just kind of let it go, tomorrow maybe we'll work on this or we'll work on that. We'll do this tomorrow. But just kind of like not have, or somehow find a way of not having the stresses of that day to kind of just like, weigh you down for the rest of the day into the following day. So somehow I had to figure out a way to de-stress everything. And that was the method that I came up with in terms of, after the day is over, in terms of everything that I need to do, just take a moment and just do what you need to do, whether you talk to yourself in my in my training village or in my actual village where I just kind of listen to music, just to kind of bring some sense of calm, I guess. And those were just kind of the two ways that I found myself just kind of really keeping. And yeah, I didn't think that I should do that. It just came about. Maybe that first time I just went up there and it just worked out
by accident.
Yeah.
But then you found that it worked, and you found it did something for you, that you created a routine, or created like a ritual around it.
Yeah.
That's really cool.
Yep. And the times that that I did cry, again, I think those were emotional stresses that happened. Not so much with something happening that day or anything, but it was just like, whew, like this is a lot, man. Like going away from what here in America to a different country, all that stuff coming in. And I think in my training village I almost cried once. I think that was really it. But once I actually got to my actual village, I think I cried like 2 or 3 times, because it was just like, man, okay, I'm doing this. This is actually happening. And again, it wasn't really homesickness that I was feeling, but it was just like that emotion of, man, like this is a lot to kind of do for oneself, right? To move away from what you can do, to learn something completely different in terms of the language, the cultures, knowing what's right, what's wrong. It's a lot of emotional stress that can be weighed on you. And so again, when I listen to music, and if I felt myself crying, I was just like, dude, just let it go. And it helps, like, even here in America, like, we see a lot, we hear a lot about, kids or youth or even adults just not being able to express emotions, right? And that can lead to, at worst case scenario, something tragic. But over there, I was like, I can't let that happen, in terms of, building everything in, because who knows what's going to happen that I just lash out at somebody, right? So somehow I have to make sure that if I'm going to, especially if I'm going to cry, to just let it out, just let it go. Obviously, I don't want to show it in front of everybody, but if I'm on my own in my backyard and, I just kind of do it, I'm just going to do it. And I really have to stop myself.
First of all, thanks for sharing that.
Yeah.
I think what you're talking about is, or, the listeners, I think what Albert is what he's sharing is that you took care of yourself. You took care of your whether it be specifically mental health, but you found a way to just find peace in your situation. You made the choice to be out of your comfort zone, but then not knowing, it's like going into the unknown. Right? And a lot of people, we live our life fearful of that unknown, so we never go for it. I talk a lot about this, through my martial arts, through my boxing.
Yep.
I learned a valuable lesson about, I need to find out. I need to, I'm too curious not to find out what that's about. And sometimes it can take a while, like you were saying, you had the idea and then you thought about it. You had your bags packed and you were like, is this really happening? Yeah. Right? This is like what, 2 or 3 years in the making, if not more. Yeah. Right. And then you get there and it's like, it's happening, but it's kind of like, it's real, but it's surreal at the same time.
Yeah.
You need those things to ground you, those rituals, that keep you going, that keep you, keep you healthy, keep you focused. And so I love it that you found a process for yourself. I'm curious, when did you leave Senegal?
Officially I left June. Is it June? June 2013, I think, is when I
2013.
eventually came back. Yep.
So some of the things that you picked up over there, being in this new environment, meeting new people, uh, learning all these new things, being uncomfortable, maybe being learning to be comfortable. What changed for you, or did things change when you came back?
Yeah. I think it was just the different. I think it's like the people perspective, you
Mm.
know, um, because again, like we are a certain way here in America because of what the history of America brought us to,
Mm.
right? Um, and the one thing that I try to share, this is literally what happened one time. So this was during my mid-year. So I think that the when I visited America, right? I think I landed here in America, coming back to like Minneapolis, and I was waiting at the door, and this person, I think this guy had like two cell phones, right?
Mm.
And I was kind of like, dude, why do you have two cell phones for? Obviously that could be a question in general with everything going on, but to me, I'm kind of like, why do you even have that? Like that, like, why are you doing this? And then I would just look around, and you know, people are doing different things. Maybe they're throwing half a water bottle that's not even fully drank away, and I'm like, dude, like, can you give that to somebody at least? Or I'm just kind of thinking these things because they they value everything so much, and it's when people say, oh, it's the little things that matter. Like, you really need to be, I want to say that you need to know what that really is. Not to say that it's a bad way for you to say it, but like, being volunteers there in Senegal, especially in rural areas, like, you really take notice of those little things that we take for granted, you know. And so, if anything at all, that's one thing that I'm like, look, I gotta, be more, you know, appropriate when it comes to certain things that I seen over there that they kind of struggle getting, right? But over here, we just use it, and that's pretty much it, right? We don't really see the need for it once after everything else, right? And even when I was visiting, my family here, they're big on plastic water bottles. I hate plastic water bottles, right? And so what we did in Senegal was we had this huge water bottle, and that was our water bottle almost for like the 2 years, right? We would just rinse it and just refill it, right? And so we had like Aquafina bottle like this, and I kept one the whole time that I was visiting my family, right? And they're like, Albert, what do you keep using the same one? I'm like, what are you talking about? Like, it seems to me that's normal, right? That I
Mm.
just use the same one over and over. But they're like, just use a different Aquafina bottle. I'm like, no, like, if I'll just use this one and just use the tap water, because I was just
Mm.
kind of used to that. Um, I think one time I went to Mall of America, and I just walked around, and I just got annoyed with people because they were just kind of like, they were just like, I don't know, just doing things out of the so-called norm where it was normal for them. But to me, I was kind of like, why are you doing that? But that was because I kind of still had that Senegalese environment, culture, way of life in me.
Mhm.
And I think I visited for a month. After 2 weeks, I was tired of being here in America. I was like, I need to go back.
Oh.
Like, I was like, I need to go back to Senegal. Like, it was one of those weird situations of like, what would you say that? Because it's America, right? You're supposed to be comfortable here, but my comfort was in Senegal. And again, this is only after
Mm.
like a year and a half or so, or a half a year, or a year or something like that. And yeah, I was kind of surprised that you know that I would feel that way. But at the same time, when I would talk to my friends about my current service, I would say, yeah, my dad and my mom, and they're doing this and this, and they're like, your mom and dad here, and I'm like, no, my mom and dad in Senegal. It wasn't just like that. So that was kind of like my whole mentality. Like, I was still stuck in that Senegal, and so the one thing that changed, and to kind of bring this all back, is that the perspective of us being human, right? Like, now I can, I haven't traveled the world per se, but at least I have a perspective of a population, of a country, of how they perceive their way of life, how they perceive their family, how they take care about their business, their perception of America, of Americans, of other nationalities, things like that. That's kind of like the bigger thing that I brought back, that I feel like I've learned more on in terms of myself, because again, sometimes, we say different things, right? But, I think how you touched on it a little bit, like until you actually experience it, or until you actually go there to see how it's like, you can only read in the books, and you can only imagine it by what you're reading. But, that's kind of why I say, reading books about, especially with traveling, they can lie to you because it's not really what they're saying, but it can still kind of make you imagine what it could be like if you traveled there. But you won't really know it until you actually travel and experience, that country, whatever it is, wherever it is that you're going. And so definitely the bigger thing that, that I guess grew about myself was just the perception of people, and kind of making sure that, that they are who they are, but at the same time, kind of being able to accept that, and not be too judgmental, even though, we all judge it, in some way or other, but not to be too judgmental, but just to understand and accept that, because, that's one thing that they try to do, especially with, the host families there in Senegal, is making sure that, that you could be accepted. If you would put in a family that just hated you, like that's a bad thing. And so we try to make sure that the family is, compatible with the volunteer, that they're going to have good relationship, because if it's not, then yeah, we need to pull that volunteer out. And so, having a country being accepting of, saying, hey, we need volunteers to kind of come in to help us out with whatever we need, whether it's from America, Japan, China, wherever, or Europe. We need to be welcoming to people. And, greeting kind of starts off everything. That's why it's so important to them, is that it starts off everything in terms of their relationship. And even if you don't know the person, like they still greet each other as if they do know each other, but that only strengthens, the communication between the two people, the groups. And so those little things are, things that, we take for granted, especially with greeting, hi, how are you? We don't say that a whole lot. And I think that's something that's missed sometimes, that it's very important, because it kind of starts off everything, and so, those little things that for sure that we take for granted sometimes, that's those things that I saw in Senegal that eventually I somehow kind of got ingrained in myself, that I wanted to make sure that I kind of keep that, if anything, to make sure that that's something that I kind of grow with.
Listeners, this is why I wanted Albert, on here. It's because, this podcast is really trying to provide people with the perspective, with principles, to help live life, just a little bit more happier, a little bit more healthier. And I think a lot of that is based on, my own experiences, is accepting people, accepting each other for who we are. Like my coach used to say, or not used to, but he would say, people living their truths.
Mm-hmm.
Like, and the more I accepted that, what does that look like? Like, if I walked, like, as soon as I walk out of my house, I mean, even in my house, but but it's like, as soon as I walk out my house, I'm going to live my truth. I'm going to be the person that I want to be. And then in return, I'm going to ask the same of others. See, that's why I like hearing things that come from a different culture, because certain cultures have it. They already have it, a part of them.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Right. Like you said, the greeting thing, not focusing on time. These things that really come down to human connection, human relationship, accepting one another, Ubuntu. It's like, I need more of that in my life, because I've always been like that, but I didn't have the tools, the rituals, the practice to help me maintain it and sustain it. And so I want to ask you, it's been, let's see, what is it now? 2021?
Yeah, yeah.
7,
8 years.
It's been 8 years.
Yep.
Where is Albert Vang? And I'm asking you, I mean, I haven't not asked you, but it's not living your truth, it's speaking your truth.
Okay, yeah.
Right? And being your truth. But I'm asking you to, I don't know, I'm kind of taking a chance, but I'm curious to know, where are you at today? Is it difficult to be here? Do you want to go back, or do you want to go somewhere else? Or are you finding a way to be in your truth,
mm-hmm.
but yet, because I think I resonate with you when it, like when you see something, you can't unsee it.
Yep.
Right? Like your experience with how water is so precious, how certain foods could not, you had to wait till Friday to get more vegetables, right?
Yep.
Where today you see people, I mean, I was telling somebody yesterday, like I work at Whole Foods, for at the moment, and it's like what customers ask for, it's like, wow, it's like, I didn't know you could purchase that many eggs at one time.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right? Are they going to eat them all?
Yeah.
Like but I'm just curious. I know there's not like one answer, but I just feel like you and I share this. Like I'm enjoying this this genuineness that you have about you.
Mm-hmm.
And I think we share similar values, if not the same, but similar. So I'm just curious to see, where's Albert Vang lately?
Yeah, I mean, I think, and overall, I think I'm in a good place. I mean, I think I'm here now, in some ways because I have the responsibility to have to be here. Um, because the one thing that growing up at some point, once eventually, my sister got married and then she was out of the household. I was like the older one at that time. My mom relied a lot on me, right? My younger two brothers were still going through high school, so they didn't have the kind of like that responsibility yet. And then the brother after me was more of like the rebel, so he was kind of like in and out of the home. And so I was kind of like the only one home, so my mom would rely on me a lot. And so one thing was, once I left the Peace Corps, I'm like, oh great, like how is this gonna work now? And eventually it worked out because everybody had to step up. But then once I came back, a few things kind of still fell on me, especially once my mom, once her health kind of got, a little bit more complicated. Once I went into my own apartment, she kind of lived with me because of different, situations and whatnot. And so, I'm not gonna say that, that kind of hindered anything or anything like that, but it was just kind of, again, just the responsibility that you have as a person or as a son, right, to your parents to kind of just do. I've always said that once I came back from Peace Corps, I was like, man, like I would love to work overseas and live overseas. I think that living overseas is still kind of like in that big picture, journey in my life. Definitely once it gets closer to like retirement age or whatever, I definitely want that still happen. Work was just something that that was just kind of hard to do. You come back, they try to hype you up a lot, before you come back here. It's like, oh yeah, everybody wants Peace Corps volunteers. And you're like, oh, great, great. You come here and you're like, man, 20 resumes later, no one's still contacting me. Like, what's going on here, right?
Yeah.
And so eventually, with the work that I do now, it was just, it fell into place, so randomly at that point. But right now, I am where I am now because of the responsibility that I have, for myself as a son, as a brother, to my family. But I definitely caught like the international traveling bug, uh, being in Senegal, and eventually after that, I took a month trip to visit my friend in South Korea. So I did that, and I visited a couple years ago. I visited my friend in Sydney, Australia.
Wow.
So I definitely still want to travel. Obviously now it's just more complicated with the Delta variant. I was telling one of my uh, former coworkers that's now retired. I was like, I want to travel, but COVID's still there, Delta's still there. You have now like these unruly passengers that are on the plane. Flights are getting delayed because of different things. Like I just don't want to go through that. And so if anything else, like I'll wait. Hopefully next year will be a new year in 2022 that hopefully we'll have some control about what's going on, that traveling can go back to some sort of norm. But I would love to eventually go back, just traveling outside. But having the every now and then, just having the urge to still want to be out there in the world. I think that's the one thing that that's kind of gotten me to where I am now. um it's every day is just a routine thing. It's kind of like very bland, to be
Mm.
honest. But it is what it is. You still have to find some joy in that. And there is a joy in that. You just kind of have to like dig around and find it, and then eventually just kind of grab it, right? That's just kind of what you have to do. There's some glimmer of laughter or something like that that can bring whatever happened during the day at least be a good day for you. And then the
Mm.
next day will just be a new day. But I think right now, I am where I am now, because again of the responsibilities that I have. And I'm tied to this house, so I kind of have to deal with this, right? And so, if I had my own apartment, it's a lot easier, to kind of just move around because you're not really tied into a mortgage or anything like that. But, um, I find the time, and that's the more important thing. You have to find a time if you want to kind of plan ahead, to kind of just do different things. But, um, yeah, I think overall, definitely, what brought me to where I am now is definitely all those different experiences. Definitely the need for more of that interaction, internationally for that matter. As much as I would love the ones here locally, um, but those different places have like so much to offer, and you kind of have to take in the good and the bad,
Mhm.
about everything. And again, just kind of make sure that you are willing to do that, and not just kind of do it just to do it. That's why I always kind of say that if I were to travel somewhere, for example, it's nice to see the landmarks, right? But take me down that old street that no one seems to visit, right? Is there like a grandpa or a grandma that's still kind of living that has knowledge about different things, that can maybe just share stories? Like take me to see that person. I
Mm.
can see. I'll go and see the Eiffel Tower at a different time, but like if there's like this small street in Paris that maybe has this little corner market that has this old person that wants to share something, like let me see that, like that's kind of what I want to see. This is
Mm.
kind of like the example that I try to share with people because again, like just kind of having that love for relationships, just to kind of see that the interaction is the biggest thing. And again, the biggest thing that I took out of being in the Peace Corps was all the relationships that I created. With the host country nationals, with the staff, with the other volunteers. Those were huge. You know,
Mm.
um, the one thing that I realized that I'm kind of like, man, like we need to go back to this, right? Was the power over there in Senegal is not consistent, so it'll get cut off every now and then, right? So we have this huge TV, we have a white wall, we project movies and things like that. Once the power gets cut off, we're heading up to the roof, and what we're doing is just talking. we're just sitting around this table and we're just talking to each other, you know. And I'm just kind of like, man, like that's I love that about Peace Corps. Forget the movie. This is like, if we're just going back to the traditional ways of just communicating and not having so much of a focus on, you know, technology, you know, cell phones and things like that, iPads, tablets, you know, and just kind of having that one-on-one conversation about anything, you know. That's the one thing that I missed about Peace Corps, you know. And you know, those are things that eventually I think, you know, in some ways, whether it's consciously or subconsciously, just drives me, is kind of having some form of communication, you know, every day, whether it's with, you know, my family, or, you know, if I'm just kind of IMing my coworkers and we're just chatting just to kind of make the workday go a little bit better. If I'm going to the store and the cashier is talking to me and we talk a little bit, like, that's great stuff, man. I think that's the human aspect that I love, you know. And I think we, you know, sometimes we don't understand that too well, and we could take those interactions for granted. But they mean a lot, you know. And you know, it's, you know, I'm not gonna go down the line of, oh, it could be a better world if everybody just did. It's like, yeah, you know, every world has kind of like their own different things, but you know, the one that you can control is kind of like you, right? In terms of what you can do, what you can accept, what you're willing to do, and things like that.
Wow, that's great. I love it how you have such a calm peace of mind. You know, it's very encouraging and very, you know, inspiring, you know, just like that you see the things that you recognize are important, you know, that you do see the importance of, like, I think what you're talking about is community. Right. And so I almost think that, you know, because I've been thinking a lot about this, is like, when I left LA, you know, not planned, but when I left LA, I lost a lot of things that I had built over there that would just come natural because they were part of my week. Because of the people I was sharing it with. That was our ritual. Whether if it was training and then going out to eat afterwards and then getting coffee afterwards.
Yeah.
Right. That was community. That was family. I've had a hard time finding that here. Right. But then I always remember, I forgot who said it, or maybe I just heard it from different places, maybe a friend. If you need something and you realize like how much value it brings to you, and maybe it could bring to somebody else, maybe it's time for you to just, I'm not saying specifically you, but I'm saying, like, this is what I've realized in myself. I really need to be very aware and conscious that I need to create that space that I need to have that fulfillment. Because otherwise I'll get caught up, swept up into being the Pete that I used to was. And I didn't like that Pete so much.
Yeah.
Right. I've learned to accept and forgive that who I was, but I've changed so much that having talks about vulnerability, having talks that are vulnerable, having talks about things that really matter to me, and not being afraid to ask questions to people that I care about. That's all I care about. Right? Because before I would hesitate, thinking that it was all fear-based. Right? So now it's like, oh, I can take the things that I learned, the spaces that I was able to experience, and because it was such a big part of my life, I just need to make the effort. I got to make the effort, make some sacrifices here and there so I can have that, And then the other thing that I'm learning is, maybe don't make it such a big thing right away. Maybe instead of because over there I was doing it once a week.
Yeah.
But maybe over here I can just do once a month. Right. So I would love it if I don't know, maybe we could talk more about it, but maybe once a month we could get together and have some people get together and I don't know. Can you cook some of that? Some of that.
No, like I mean, like no. I think
Make
I
the
know my
fish. Make
friends.
the fish.
Yeah, I know my friends have tried, and I mean they don't do the main dish is called chibujin, right? Which is just kind of like rice. It translates to rice and fish. I mean it's simple enough because I mean the way that I've heard is that you cook the fish, the broth that's the fish is in, you just kind of dice it over white rice, and just that adds a flavor to the rice, right? And
Yeah.
you could just throw vegetables on there if you want to, but definitely don't throw a random vegetable that they won't have, right? I mean cassava, squash, carrot, cabbage. Those are kind of like the main ones that they would have. But I think that's pretty much it. I think they, the rice. If they cook the rice, they actually burn the bottom of the rice. But that's the good stuff, man. The crunchy rice, as we call it. Oh man, that's some good stuff, man. But no, that's like the general concept of how to make the chebujin, the fish and
Yeah.
rice. Obviously, you could get more fancy if you want that. I think you can even YouTube it. I'm sure they'll have people kind of make it. But no, I cannot cook the food. I could barely make my own things to eat over here.
I really like the idea of having a space where you can go and not be too far off from something that you already can relate to, but then there's something to learn, like the whole greeting thing, right? It's like, well, I know the importance of greeting, but by hearing you say, and that's why I asked you what's an example of how they say it, because by hearing those words and then understanding the meaning behind those words for that culture, for that language, you get to learn something, you get to educate something, you get to add a new piece to your communication bank that you didn't have before, right? But I think you have these tools. Like you went through the training, you had the experience that now if you have time, if you're available, you could share that, right? And I think that would be wonderful. I would just really love, like, how you see the world, and you care about people so much. I think this has been great.
Okay, great, awesome, man.
Yeah,
I loved it.
Thanks. So every guest, I ask 5 random questions at the end.
Okay.
And then we can wrap up. Is that cool?
Okay. Sure.
All right. What's an animal that represents you?
Raccoon.
Why?
That's my spirit animal. Because not that I dig through trash, but they almost eat anything, right? And again, it goes back to food, man. Like that's the whole thing. I mean, raccoons are kind of like sneaky in some ways, but they'll always dig through stuff just to find food. But for some reason, I kind of found myself talking a lot about raccoons at one point. And I'm like, that just might be my spirit animal. So yeah, it's raccoon.
That's awesome. My girlfriend, her nickname is Sexy Trash Panda. Okay. Anyways, what's your favorite food?
Oh man, that's a tough one, man. Cause
if okay, if someone asked you, hey, I'm gonna take you out, or I'm gonna make you your favorite dish for, like, we're celebrating your birthday or whatever.
Yeah.
What would it be? It could be a restaurant, but if it's something that you like made, what is it? What's that dish that makes you go, yes, yes?
Oh man, that's a tough one.
You can only pick one for now.
Well, let's see. So, so I'll answer it this way. So, the one meal that I missed a lot when I was in Senegal, that I missed in America here, besides homemade cooking stuff, was the full out American breakfast. Right?
Okay.
Pancakes, sausage, bacon, milk, orange juice. I don't drink coffee that much, but whatever. Throw the coffee on there. But I like when I thought more about food in Senegal, I was like, man, I miss breakfast. Most important meal of the day. Like that spread. Oh man, that's it right there. That's the one thing. I don't know if it's my favorite meal, but for sure, if I'm gone for a long time, man, I start missing breakfast, man.
That's a good one. No,
Yeah.
I'm a big fan of breakfast. Like I'm one of those, where I like to go to those restaurants where they serve breakfast 24/7.
Yeah.
So
I always want to order from Perkins, man. I have a Perkins that's like 5 minutes down the road. Right? I'm like always not wanting to order it, but yeah, I'm always like, man, I should order from Perkins, man. Just get that, tremendous 12 breakfast meal, man.
maybe tonight's the night.
Maybe we'll see. I was thinking food tonight, but I don't know. I might go breakfast tonight. We'll see.
After this podcast, it's breakfast, baby. Okay.
Start dialing Perkins.
Okay, so that's
two.
That's two. Okay, I'm saving my deeper ones towards the end.
Oh sure, yeah.
Okay, what's the next place you want to travel to?
Next place I want to travel to is Japan. Somewhere in Japan. I originally I had people try to figure out my age, but I'll just spoil it for you guys. So I turn 40 next year, the big 40, and I'm like, man, I want to travel to somewhere in the biggest cities of Japan. Tokyo is kind of comes into mind. I brought that up to my brother, and apparently there's like this old school video game store in Tokyo that you could get like the Japan Super Nintendo version, old school games, and I'm like, man, yeah, that would be pretty cool. And I think they have like a true Mario Kart that you can actually rent out go-karts and go around Tokyo. I want to do that. So I think right now that's kind of where I'm leaning to. My dad has a few more business that he wants to do back in France. We don't know about that yet. I watch on YouTube, sometimes like, other cities in Australia, maybe going back there. But I think right now the number one right now is Japan somewhere.
That's awesome. That's great. Yeah, let me know. I have some good friends of mine that.
Yeah. No, I think once you mentioned that, I was like, yeah, for sure.
Yeah, my buddy Jason Ho lived out, or he worked there. I think he did live out there for a little bit, but he's into like those toys and Star Wars and Nintendo, and he's into all that stuff. What would you say to somebody who is considering whether or not they should try something that's how you felt about going to the Peace Corps, going to like living in Senegal? Would you recommend that to someone, or what would you say to someone who is like on the fence?
Yeah, I mean, I would definitely recommend that. Again, I always joke around, but sometimes I'm serious. I'm like, look, if I was president, I would make Peace Corps mandatory, only because it brings out that other perspective of the world and what you can experience from it, right? Again, Peace Corps is not for everyone. I've definitely had a few of my, people in my group that have left early. Heck, I even wanted to leave early because of, one thing that happened in a week, right? But people, have bad services. People leave early, whether they're sick or they just don't want to do it. That's not for them. Obviously, every country is going to have a different feel of their program, depending on where you are. Europe, Africa, South America, where have you. It's going to be different for everybody. It's just what you will make of it. But, the way that I would explain Peace Corps to someone, I would say do it because of that world perspective and the fact that you could go do what you feel you're good at doing, education, health, youth, economic, whatever it is, and you get to travel to a country that most likely you probably wouldn't travel to at all, right? So you get to do both, and you could possibly enjoy that. But I don't always, say the good stuff. I will say, look, I've had issues with this and that, so that is something that I could experience. Obviously, again, with men and women serving in the Peace Corps, they're gonna have similar experiences but different outcomes in terms of based on their gender, right? It's just going to be different for them, but they're going to face similar situations, and it all kind of depends on eventually how they handle it and what kind of happens to that. But I will always promote Peace Corps if someone was to just ask me. I mean, obviously I love talking about it, but yeah, I will definitely encourage that. It does open up your own eyes in terms of, what else is out there. Um, and if we eventually talk about Peace Corps again on your podcast here, there's definitely a situation that did happen. That when I pre-Peace Corps, it happened and it changed my perspective after Peace Corps, right?
Oh.
So there is a situation that happened. So we'll touch on that, at a different time. But it does open up your eyes a little bit more, and I would definitely recommend it because it's there's no experience like it, and especially now that you can choose where you want to go. That's definitely a plus. But even if you wanted to just be like, yep, I'm just open to go anywhere, and just let the pin pick a certain point in the map for you to go to, just do it that way. Because again, yeah, if I had my choice, I mean, I think my choices, I think Asia was like last. I didn't even pick Asia as like a top choice, right? Me being Asian, it was kind of like you would think that would be number one. That wasn't even number one. But I definitely wanted like like a certain experience, and so it's just kind of what you want out of it. And you have to be interested in it. You just don't want to do it just to put something on the resume. You're not gonna get what you want out of it. Like, do it because maybe it's the people that you're interested in meeting. It's the job that takes you somewhere else. The grassroots, as we call it, to be able to help a community, whatever it is, whatever interest you can find out of it. You have to have some interest on wanting to do that with the Peace Corps.
Since we talk about self-care and mental health,
Mhm.
if somebody found themselves there, but they felt shocked, maybe in the beginning uncomfortable, maybe homesick, what advice would you give them? Because based on what you experienced, based on what you shared and how you found your process that helped you, what would you share to somebody that finds himself a little bit out of their yeah.
Yep. So again, this goes back to what my language teacher told me. So she told me kind of like a little saying in Wolof, which is Luwai jeemul dukaman, which translates to, again, you'll never know it if you don't try, right? And so that was kind of like my motivating slang, right? So if I was like, oh man, I don't want to do it, man. I would just have her in my head and be like, Albert, and she's like pointing at me, right? She's like, Albert, do it. You'll never know if you don't try. And it's like, Uli, ugh. And so and then I would go and do it, right? But no, that's the thing. Like you really can't say one thing, especially if you haven't done it or tried it, right? It's really hard to kind of fall in that kind of space, right? And so even going back to food, right? It's hard for me to say I hate seafood because that's actually incorrect. I can't say I hate it because I never tried it. So then I kind of changed it to, well, I've never really tried it, and so it's hard for me to try food. It's not that I don't like it, it's just I've never tried it. And so yeah, so that's kind of like my motto for that whole service was, you'll never know it if you don't try. And again, go the distance. Hercules theme, Disney's Hercules, right? That was like the thing. Like, how far are you willing to go? And when
Hercules,
yeah,
I thought you were gonna say
no, Disney's Hercules, go the distance. Michael Bolton. That was the song, man. That was my theme song. That was my theme song for my Peace Corps service.
Oh, I love it. I love it. I love Hercules. Okay.
Yeah, and so every now and then you'll hear people say, "Oh, I'll go as far as I can," or I'll go and do this and do that. But it's like, can you though? Really? Like like when you're actually presented with the situation, like, will you actually do it? And again, like, I think only my 6 months into service, after I got actually into my actual service, I wanted to go. I was ready to just go because I was like having a hard time, right? And the thing is that I always have that ticket home in my back pocket. If I wanted to go, I could just call up the staff and be like, "Hey, I'm ready to go. I can't do this," and they would have booked, and I would have gone home, right? But eventually, at that point, I was talking to myself, and I'm like, "Look, Albert, if there was somebody better that applied in your same position and they got it, then they would have gotten it. But because you got it and you're here, that's why you're here." So then I was kind of like, I was trying to change my own mind to say, yeah, I'm here for a reason. Even though it's not working out right now, I just can't quit, right? I
Mm,
just can't just stop. Like, they selected me for a reason out of, I don't know how many people applied for my position, right? From Minnesota.
mm,
Like, there's a reason why they picked me and not, person A, B, and C. There was a reason for that. And so I had to change my negative thought in terms of saying, okay, yeah, I could easily go and I could just go. But, you wanted to do this. You're here now. It's not going well, but is that really it? Or can you do a little bit better? Can you change something here and there? Can you figure out a different solution? And talking to myself usually it's kind of like that way of like figuring out issues. Um, but yeah, no, I mean it goes back to, you'll never get it if you don't try, and again, that was my motto. Once I got stuck about doing a project, for example, but once I started thinking back to that, I'm like, what's the worst that can happen? Someone says no, right? That's like not the worst thing. So let me
mm.
just go and do it. If I get something positive out of it, then hey, I can continue on with what I need to do, right? And I have a separate story with that too, but we'll just leave it at that for now. But
Mhm.
yeah, definitely, you'll never get it if you don't try.
I think that's so important. Like when we talk about mental health, we talk about self care. It really is like a kind of like tricking your
Yep.
brain.
Yeah.
Like actually, it's not like that. It's actually like this, right? But we leave, depending on maybe the things that influence us prior to like growing up or whatever. It's like sometimes it's a little challenging to realize that no, that's actually my norm. That's my new norm. Yeah, it made me think of a saying that my sister Nancy's been sharing. She even said it last night when we went out to dinner. She said a farmer doesn't plant a like a seed or a crop without it intending to grow. You were meant to do this thing that you wanted to happen. It's like
Hmm.
you plant, like why would you plant it otherwise?
Yeah. Yeah.
you know but we have our thoughts that are like, no, I'm not worthy, or I can't handle it,
Hmm.
right? All these like things that kind of hold us back. So I just want to say thank you for listening to that side of you that said to stay.
It's really easy to fall into the negatives, right? Like that
Yeah.
once we hear something negative, it's really easy to fall into that trap of, yeah, no, that's right. That I shouldn't do this. So this is wrong. But again, it's always kind of more difficult to try and scrape for that positive, to try and really dig it out of under all that negative stuff, right? And so, and that's the challenge,
Mm.
with what we're talking about here with mental health and self-care and whatnot, is just kind of finding that aspect of, you know again, joy, happiness, laughter, whatever it would be, just to kind of find that, just to kind of brighten it up a little bit, right? But it's sometimes, yeah, it's hard for everyone to just try and dig yourself out of that negative.
Yeah. Anything else you'd like to leave the listeners? Any last things you wanted to say to them? Um, if they want to get hold of you, can they reach out to you?
Yeah, no, for sure, for sure, for
Uh,
sure. Yeah. Let's see. So I don't do social media. So sorry, I don't have Twitter, Instagram. I only have Facebook. You can always find me at Albert Vang. My picture would be something like this, in a suit or something like that. So that's when it's gonna be me. I think it still says that I live in the car. I don't think I even changed that to like living here. I think it still says that I live in the car. But yeah, no, I'm on Facebook. I think if anything else, I don't know how do you share contact some way
yep.
somehow? Because I could just
Yeah.
send you something in terms of my contact information on like Facebook Messenger or something like that.
Yep. I
Um,
usually listeners, I usually add on the description
oh,
a
sure, okay,
a contact. Yeah. So should
yeah.
we
So
do it?
I'll
Yeah.
send that in a bit.
Cool.
Phone number, email, what have you. If you're interested, in the Peace Corps, listeners, if you are interested in the Peace Corps, you can never be too late on that. They're saying that the age of Peace Corps volunteers is only just growing. So because it used to be, early 20s, mid 20s, it's kind of starting growing into like the late 20s, early 30s. We've had some retirees join Peace Corps. So the age range is actually all over the place, in terms of doing that. But If you just want to reach out for anything, like I'm always available to make time to talk about anything. I could talk about different things all the time. Obviously I have my own opinions about things, right or wrong, but no, I love talking to people about different things depending on what they want to talk about. So yeah, I'm always willing to.
All right. Yeah, we'll add that in the description. And
Yeah.
So is there a way of saying like closing or goodbye in the yeah.
The one thing, so the saying that I put on one of my PowerPoints when I did something for a friend of mine at college, I left it off with dinanu ko beenen yoon, which means we'll leave it for next time.
Okay. Wait, how do you say it?
So I think it's like dinanu ko. So it's dinanu ko ba ben ba
ba
ben ba beenen yoon. Yeah. I'll text. I'll message.
All good.
Yeah, but it translates to we'll leave it for next time. So it's a way to kind of leave it open that the conversation is not done. We'll continue it at a different time because again, with greeting and conversations with Senegalese host nationals, it's an ongoing thing. It never really ends. It's always it's never really bye, but it's like see you next time kind of thing. Or we'll continue this. So that leaves it kind of like an open-ended. That we'll continue on next time we see each other. We'll continue this conversation,
and we will.
Thanks,
Albert.
Again, I have more stories to share about Peace Corps. So whenever it gets to that, I have bad stories, I have good stories, I have a lot of things to share. So whenever you can make time and I can make time, we're good.
Albert wants to be my only guest on the Pete Wong podcast. So, well, we'll get the Peace Corps to sponsor, and then we can talk about it. No, but thank you for spending this afternoon with me and the listeners. Loved it. This is going to be a great episode for everyone to hear, and yes, we will continue our conversation.
Yeah, thank you for having me. Yeah, it's been a pleasure. This is definitely a first time. So. But again, overall, like, I just love talking. But yeah, no, thanks very much for having me.
Awesome. All right. Well, I'm going to do my closing. Remember, you are loved, you are worthy, and you are enough. Blessings to all of you.
Thanks for tuning in. We'll catch you next week. And remember, you are loved, you are enough, and you are worthy. Blessings to all of you.